was born with my disability, so it's called a congenital deformity. It's that delicate balance of knowing that you can have it all, just not at the same time. I think a lot of my journey has been putting trust in people who are much older than me, that are wiser, that have been through many parts of life that you can only experience through age. I'm searching to be, and rather letting the journey mold me into the person that could be better than that. Black love is amazing.
Yes.
Interracial love is amazing. White love is amazing. As long as it hinges on the fact that you love the person. It's not just for me, the athlete. There's a whole host of people that put in time, effort, and love into me being able to represent the country.
Yes.
African immigrant mother that says you will use academia as your way out of poverty.
Yeah.
Last milestone is being the world champion in the 100 meter now in Paris, so the 2023 World Championships.
Yes.
Hello and welcome to Navigating the 20s. You are with me, Zinhle. In episode 9, I sit down with the incredible Mpumelelo Mhlongo, a double Paralympian and multiple world championship medalist. In this inspiring conversation, Mpumelelo opens up about his journey to becoming a South African Paralympian, overcoming challenges like being born with a clubfoot and amniotic band syndrome. Beyond his athletic achievements, Mpumelelo is part of the Investec business banking team. He's a businessman and a chemical engineering PhD candidate dedicated to changing the world. We delve into topics such as embracing identity in interracial relationships, navigating corporate spaces as an African Black man, and the crucial role of the youth in voting and driving change in South Africa. Join us as we celebrate the remarkable Mpumelelo Mhlongo's pursuit of dreams and breaking down barriers on and off the track.
Hey guys, so I'm with Mpumi today. Mpumi, I would like to refer to you as a multi-potentialite, and we were having this conversation earlier. I'll give context to what I mean by that. But I think you're a person who's like thriving in many disciplines. And you're not like, one can't box you and say like, this is Mpumi, like you're just a Paralympian. I mean, you are in corporate as well. You hold a PhD. You're also a husband. So you're doing a lot of different things that feed into holistically who you are for a person to understand. And I think that's how I would describe you. I see you as a multi-potentialite or a person with multi-passion points. Would you say that's an accurate description of who you are? No pressure.
I would definitely say it's a kind description. I would have gone with chaotic.
Oh, chaotic. Okay, there's beauty in chaos, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I weather the storm, but the highs are high and the lows, I tell you what, they can be low.
Yeah. Let's start with your journey from being at UCT. What did you study, and does that actually translate to what you're doing now?
So at the University of Cape Town, I studied chemical engineering and still currently studying chemical engineering or reading towards the doctorate. So hopefully we'll close that soon.
Hectic.
But I really think that much of life, as my grand and mother would always say, is how do you take one skill set that you're cultivating in one area and translate it through the different facets of life. So, that cross-discipline mindset.
Yes.
And so I would definitely say what I learned in my chemical engineering degree is very much useful in every part of my life, because what we did was process optimization.
Yeah.
And everything needs to be optimized in your own daily life. And what I do as a structured finance consultant in corporate at the moment.
Yes.
And it's hinged on problem solving.
Yeah.
Where there is a problem, what solutions could you potentially put to the table that could alleviate some of that stress and pain that your clients see, or what I have to put my wife through.
That's a good one. And I like that. Like, I think that opens up your mind, because if you don't think of your degree as being expansive and integral part of other parts of your life, like you speaking about optimization, and that can happen between diet and routine, getting rid of inefficiencies. So some people are stuck in the idea that like, okay, because I studied chemical engineering, I must go into a field where I do chemical engineering. And so like a lot of people in our community are in their 20s and some of them are transitioning and trying to make sense of their career. What made you go into, I guess, you in what somebody would categorize like in the investment banking field, as opposed to going for a traditional chemical engineering role?
I think it's just a matter of luck, right? And I think a lot of my journey has been putting trust in people who are much older than me, that are wiser, that have been through many parts of life that you can only experience through age, which I don't have much of.
Yeah.
I still think of myself as a child in certain aspects.
Yeah.
And what I did is when I realized that I don't want to be a process engineer, so I don't want to do chemical reactor design. I don't want to be at a plant out in the middle of nowhere without any social interactions, without the corporate culture of that plant being embedded in those towns.
Yeah.
I want to be part of the people. I want to know what's happening in the city of gold. I want to be able to see my friends high and wide wherever they may be.
Yeah.
And that just led me to look for opportunities. And the real part was, can I find a space that will allow me to grow?
Sure.
What that looks like, I don't know, because I want somebody who can advise me on how to grow, because we are very biased in the way in which we see our own lives really playing out.
Sure.
And once you let go of who you think you need to be, it opens the world of who you can be.
Yeah. Oh my word. When you touch on that, I'm like that's a whole movie of my life. It's like at every stage when you grow, like you experience this growth trajectory, and when you get to the top, it's like you have to let go of the person you were down the stairs. And if you don't let go of who you think you're supposed to be, then you stop yourself from growing to the next level. And I guess that's where mentorship and looking to elderly people to help you and guide you along that path is important.
Major part of our culture.
Yeah.
And I think or at least people my age, what I've seen, they have this mindset that letting go is losing authenticity. And it's like, no, I mean, there's still key values that I hold on to that were bestowed on me by my parents and my grandparents.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of not shaping that into a person that I am searching to be, and rather letting the journey mold me into the person that could be better than that.
Yeah, no, that is beautifully put. I don't even want to mess that up. I'm going to leave it just as you said it. The second part of your journey is like, I guess, your road to becoming a Paralympian. How did you realize you had the talent to run? Or how did you hone in that skill to get to that level?
I think sports has always been a massive part of my life. It's the way I differentiated myself growing up in our neighborhood, because I didn't want to be known as the kid with the disability.
Yeah.
So I said, well, who's the kid that everyone looks to? It's the fast kid.
Yes.
So then I decided I'll be the fast kid.
Yeah.
Because when you're the fast kid, nobody cares if your foot looks funny or if you don't have toes. So I've always had this mindset of be who you need to be for the person you are in that moment. And that showed me that I had a massive amount of speed and power that you could utilize. But the actual Paralympic journey was just a matter of like, I was getting fit for football at university, trying to move away from the clubbing scene because my then girlfriend, now wife, said that I partied too much. And what other passions do you have? I'm like, I think I remember once upon a time. And then one thing led to another. Vugile Scotty, a guy with an arm amputee, spotted me and said, dude, you could represent the country. And I said, don't be playing games here, man. Show me the way and I'll represent this country. And the rest has been history.
That is amazing. And I think people don't know the time that it takes, like the work that you have to put in to get to that level. We often automatically assume that like this person was fast, so therefore it's talent that's taken them there. Would you debunk that myth? Do you think that it's because you were already grooming yourself, even though it was never placed in your mind that you'd become a Paralympian? It was that because you had already started putting in the work early, getting ready, like trying to be the fastest, and then moving into that soccer journey, that you were actually preparing yourself?
I do believe that talent plays a major role in your own self-confidence and how you then apply yourself in whatever discipline you're doing.
Yeah.
But I debunk that myth. Talent won't get you there.
Yeah.
It has to be hard work. It has to be discipline. It has to be a support system. And it looks differently in different parts of the world.
Yeah.
We don't have the structural privileges that the North sees. So in the global South, it is more talent than it is hard work.
Yeah.
But the hard work factor is what keeps you in the game for longer and in a much more sustainable way, so that there is life after sports.
Exactly. And we're going to touch on that topic. But another big theme, if we can touch on the idea of how did you arrive at your disability? Were you born with it? Was it something that happened like when you were growing up? Can you talk us through your journey?
Yeah, so I was born with my disability, so it's called a congenital deformity.
Yeah.
So that's the strange part. The word disability I only learned at a much later age. I always knew I had a deformity.
Yes.
But I never thought of myself as disabled, which is, I think it's just a function of the fact that I learned English very late.
Yes.
And the connotations with that dis and able combination, prefix, suffix, I was like,
Doesn't sound right?
as umZulu, this is not adding up.
Yeah.
I can do whatever you need me to do except for wiggle my toes.
Yeah.
So because it was a congenital deformity, this is how I've always known myself to be. This is how I grew up. It's called an amniotic band syndrome with a deformed clubfoot.
Sure, that's a lot of big words.
It's a lot of words,
Yeah.
especially as a kid who didn't know English. It's like, yes, okay.
Yeah.
But basically what happens is that while the child is in their mother's womb and there is a rupture of the amniotic sac, that causes entanglements in key feature limbs. So it's normally either a foot or a hand where it constricts blood flow. So then your foot doesn't fully form.
Sure.
Or your fingers don't fully form. And that's what it is.
Sure. And I think you like, for you, you're not defined by your disability or the fact that you don't have like toes or like in that sense. So I want to kind of understand, for somebody who does have a different disability, whether they arrived at it later in life or they were born with it, and they find that they do feel that they are defined by it, either by community, not in the sense that for them personally, that's how they define themselves. How do you escape that, or how do you get your community to accept you as you see yourself, as opposed to seeing the disability and then the self? I don't know if that question makes sense.
It makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
You're asking the separation of the person to the thing.
Yes.
And I have to give credit to my mother, because that's where it's due.
Yeah.
And she used to say that if you want to not be defined by this disability, because she's like, dude, you have a weird looking foot. There's no two ways about it. You don't have fingers. That is strange.
Yeah.
People will ask questions.
Yeah.
It's just when you see something that's out of the ordinary, this is exactly what you do. You ask questions. Why is it like that?
Yeah.
Why is a Michael Phelps the way they are? Why is Caster Semenya this good?
Exactly.
And she said, well, use that thing that you're so ashamed of to break through into the world.
Sure.
And for me, without this, amniotic band syndrome with this deformed clubfoot, I wouldn't be a Paralympic athlete. I would have never represented the country.
Sure.
I would have never had scholarships that would have taken me out of the townships into the suburban schools, which means I probably would never have been in a position where I had a degree and calling myself an academic.
Exactly.
So I think it's really about honing in what you feel you're ashamed of and turning it into something you're proud of, and then automatically the community around you looks at it differently.
Sure. And that's powerful in itself. I think even like you can take it to personal life. Often what we think is our weakness is what's our differentiating factor. So like whether you started as a kid and now you can public speak, you can use that weakness to your strength, right?
I hate that saying.
Sorry. Okay, but we can disagree. Actually, why do you hate that saying?
No, I love the way you first phrased it.
Yes.
Where you said it's a differentiator.
Yes.
And then, but normally, colloquially, we understand as people will say, oh, you can turn your weakness into a strength.
Okay, not
like,
necessarily.
Yeah.
Okay, fair point. Yes.
And I'm like, some people can.
Yeah.
And definitely, but there's a huge amount of structural inequities that don't allow people to turn. It's like telling somebody who's poor and in poverty, turn your poverty into richness. It's like,
that is not even practical. Exactly.
What does that mean? Where do I start?
Yeah.
But the sentiment behind it is to say that whatever it is that's holding you back could be a source of motivation for you to take one foot forward.
Yes.
And that part of that philosophy I love.
No, thank you. Thank you for having that debate, because even in my mind, I was putting it in the latter rather than the former, in the sense that, for instance, I'm not a fast runner. I'm not going to try now and be a you, because it's too late. That ship has sailed. Yeah. So instead of focusing on that, but often I think like in your childhood, there's things you either get teased about that you then see as a weakness. So sometimes it's actually your perception of what is a weakness, but it's not necessarily a weakness. So for instance, for me, I struggled with a language, I guess, like my accent wasn't right. So I wouldn't want to speak. I don't want to speak in class. I wouldn't want to put my hands up because I was like worried all the kids are going to laugh at how I'm enunciating certain words. And fast forward later, that becomes my strength, that speaking becomes it. But
that's why we're here today.
Exactly. So, but yeah, this is not about me. Yeah. The other part, you're an academic. I don't know how you did it. I mean, you started in your undergrad, you did a master's, you did a PhD, but you're doing all of this while still working and while still representing the country. Where do you find the time?
It's an interesting question that everyone always asks. I mean, we all have the same 24 hours.
I think you've got more than the rest of us.
No, I think we choose our battles differently. My source of strength and what charges my battery is being busy with things I'm passionate about. And at times, people use a lot of recovery time, and when they recover, they do that through whatever different means it may be. But my recovery is in switching between my corporate life into my sporting world. And then when my sporting world and corporate life are both a bit chaotic and I feel like I need more recover, then I become an academic.
Yes.
So it's just so happens that my form of recovery are things that people do as careers, which is why it looks great. But, you drop the ball at every point, as everyone does in life. Yeah. And sometimes I feel like, really have this life thing sorted, and then adulting adults. Hey. And when it does, I'm like, I also don't know.
Life humbles. Yeah.
And it's that delicate balance of knowing that you can have it all, just not at the same time. Yeah. So I worked at all three aspects of my life, and I've just allowed it to be different tenors in terms of when they end. Yeah. So sports will end very soon, which means I'll then have two focuses, and then how those manifest is just a matter of time. I'm also waiting to see.
Yeah. And tell me, like, do you find that you've got a good support system? Like, what's encouraging the matrix to flow easily? Like, if you perhaps married somebody who wasn't supportive of your sporting career, do you think it would have flowed as easy? Because you travel a lot, so that also impacts being married and being in a relationship, and you have to factor that into your academic career and sporting life.
No, I really think it's like a combination of a few things. Well, one was the fact that my mother is African mother. Yes. Or you could even say that African immigrant mother that says you will use academia as your way out of poverty. Yeah. There's no choice about it. You're going to be, a football player? Man. You don't have that privilege.
Exactly.
So that was just a matter of circumstance. That's why I had to go the academic route, because my parents said, this is what you're doing. Yeah. And then I still continued the passion of sports. So I pursued sports on the side, and it then ended up being a career on its own. But when it comes to who you marry, I think the key factor of what me and Monique have defined for ourselves is that there's three entities that live within a marriage.
Okay.
It's Mpumelelo, the person. It's
Yes.
Monique, the person.
Yes.
Then it's the relationship that forms these two individuals together. So you need to take care of all three at different points. And then she realizes that as long as Mpumelelo, the person, is fueled,
Yes.
he will put more into the relationship
Sure.
and vice versa. And that's how the matrix stays alive.
I've never heard anyone describe it, but when you put it like that, like I can visually, because then if Mpumelelo, the person, is empty, you can't refill that part. And sometimes you're not always giving 100%. So it's not the two balls giving 100%. Sometimes you're at 80 because this is a good week for you, and maybe she's at 40. So it's also rebalancing, and that factors into how much you're giving into the relationship.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And because we have that separation of energies that need to feed in and that also need to get, it allows for the individuals to really flourish. So that's why we're so supportive of each other.
Yeah.
As long as it's something we can see is not draining that person's energy to the point of affecting this other entity, which is the relationship.
Yeah. I have to speak or get your advice for us single, not married people on that, because your relationship with Monique is very special. Like I still remember like when we were during Gracia days when you guys were still friends and, you know, eventually to the point where you guys got married. For people that are single, what would you say? Like I would, but correct me if I'm wrong. I think you consistently pursued her. So like,
Sure.
A lot of people say the younger generation, somebody would be like, oh, you don't want to give in, you want to put me in the friend zone, tap out. Like, what allowed you to consistently pursue her, and how did you know that like she is the one, like, or she's somebody I really want in my life?
I think you hit the nail on the head. I knew she was somebody I wanted in my life, period.
Yeah.
So that was what was of importance to me. Whether that was in a friendship or relationship form, or it was the guy that annoyed her because we shared common interests and her interest became my interest.
Yeah.
I just knew I wanted her close because the way she made me feel, the person I was when I was with her is the person that I was proud of. And it's a person that I realized could give a lot more to the world than with her not in my life.
Sure.
So, I mean, in retrospect, she did friend zone me for a long period of time, but it was never something I even considered. I was just like, this person is close to me. I like her. At some point, she'll be convinced this will work. And if she's not, that's also okay.
Yeah.
Because it just means I would have made a really good friend in the process, and that's what matters.
And I think that mindset is rare because guys are just like, okay, if somebody doesn't want me, I'm not going to waste my time in the friends zone, without understanding that not every person that you meet necessarily needs to end up being a romantic relationship. You could actually have a beautiful platonic friendship.
Yes, and I've had lots of those in the past, and I think that's what gave her comfort, because she's like, you have a lot of friends who are girls. I don't know if I should be worried or this is a red flag or a green flag.
Yeah.
And I said, that's because, you know, we fail to see the human aspect of the gender that we are attracted to. And luckily I had a mother who whipped me on the backside many moons ago, so I could see a person first, and then it became a case of, am I actually attracted to this person?
Yeah.
Or is it this fictitious character I've made up in my head of who this person needs to be that I'm attracted to? And then I could differentiate between those two quite well by the time I was 18.
Wow, that's amazing. Like I think you're a different level. So like just even starting there, the way you think, I don't know what your mother fed you. Like she must give all of us the recipe, but you're very, like intuitive. You're like an old soul in a weird way. You've like been reincarnated like 10 times or something. But on that, like, how did you know? For people, like I think people in their 20s always think like they're too young for marriage or too young to settle down. How did you know you were ready to get married?
I don't even think I know now.
Really?
Yeah. To be honest, it really depends on the metric that you're using. In am I ready? why do you need to be ready, and what does that look like for who?
Sure.
Because then it's always a case of balancing. When you're ready and the partner is not ready, then what happens? You then decide to sever that relationship because the timing is wrong.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a case of whether I was ready or not. It was a case of what felt right. And when it felt right, and I could see through Monique's actions and the way she interacted with the relationship and myself, something just told me that, yes, now is the time.
Sure.
Bearing in mind, we did have plenty of conversations over the years. So I wasn't going to be shocking her and dirtying my knee for her to say, aye, boy.
Exactly.
Multiple conversations until at some point I just felt it on the bones. And it's cliche to say, but in some aspects you need to feel that spiritual side of you that speaks to you that a lot of us ignore or haven't learned how to communicate with, which is really essential for every other part of your life anyway.
Absolutely. How do you tune into that voice, like the guiding voice? Is it guided by spirituality, or like what's your practice so that you can hear your intuition, the inner voice that guides you to making like the decisions that are right for you?
I think it's a massive amount of reflection. I try as a daily ritual.
Yeah.
Is this still serving where we want to be?
Sure.
And whatever I'm going through, that's the question that will keep coming up in my head. And then through the voices of the people close to me, I'll ask for guidance, from what you see from the outside, what are you thinking? Because this is what I'm feeling.
Yeah.
And I don't ever think I have an expansive vocabulary. So a lot of the time I'm extremely lazy. So I'll say, I feel anxious.
Yeah.
And then I have to go to the people who have, in tune their vocabulary to say, this is the feeling. I've associated with anxiety.
Yeah.
Is that true?
Yeah.
And they'll be like, no, that's anguish. Come, okay.
Yeah.
Give it to me. What does that actually mean? Because the bias of language says that if I say anxiety, therefore this is the root cause.
Yeah.
And between those two things of really seeking guidance with the people close to me on what I'm feeling and how to define that and how to describe it versus with the reflective aspects of a daily, is this still serving where we want to be?
Sure.
It's how I manage to speak to those energies.
It's so weird how these themes are connecting. But like earlier, I spoke to a guest on our podcast called Mhlono, and she was also speaking about in African languages, we don't have the words to describe depression, anxiety. So then often mental health becomes a barrier, or like when you're trying to describe emotions, we don't have a sophisticated vocabulary that can explain. You can say you're angry, you're sad, but how do I explain, like, I'm slightly anxious, more depressed today? It's hard to find those words in isiZulu or Xhosa or whatever language a person speaks.
Yeah, I think that's because the African culture, or at least as I know it from my own experience, has been one of, we don't always use words as the form of how we define our feelings.
Yes.
If you think of maybe your own parents, I know my mom didn't know the word sorry.
Yes.
But I knew that if she was cooking my favorite meal, she
that
meant
meant sorry. Yeah.
So a lot of it is played out in actions and those daily behaviors, which you then have to make sense of, even if it doesn't have a particular word that's linked to it.
Yeah, 100%. And going back to your relationship with Monique, you guys are in an interracial relationship. What's that like, or what's the experience been like for you guys in South Africa? Do you find, you probably don't care what other people think, but as long as your community, is supportive of that. But outside of that, do you think there's still barriers, given our background in South Africa, that we experience apartheid now, like the laws changed about 28 years ago, that we haven't really transformed as a society to think of love beyond racial boundaries?
Yeah, that is a loaded question. But in a very simple answer is that there's still weird aspects about being in an interracial marriage. The relationship is different, but when it's marriage, it seems like, solid and concrete, and it's a forever binding.
Yeah.
And as an example in corporate, as a black male who maybe wants to one day be in leadership,
Yeah.
you already set out as a sellout, as an example. And there's all these different cultural backgrounds where she's Portuguese, I'm Zulu,
Yeah.
that you have to work through because those families don't speak in the same way. And it's really about acceptance. And whatever happens in the outside world, if it reverberates enough to affect your relationship, then there's something not solid in your relationship.
Sure.
So we've never had any issues in terms of what is external to us coming and affecting the internal.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean you don't sometimes look at the weird looks or sometimes like very endearing looks where it's like,
Yeah.
I love to see a black man.
Yeah,
and a white
yes,
woman.
yeah.
This is beautiful. I'm like, why? Why is
It should be normal, right?
Yeah. It's like these are just two people who are in love that met each other and it worked.
Yeah.
And maybe it will work forever and maybe it won't.
Yeah.
You never know. But yeah, there are those strange, either people look down on it or people put it on a pedestal as like, this is the archetype.
This is the epitome of what South Africa wanted.
Yeah. And meanwhile, it's just like, black love is amazing.
Yes.
Interracial love is amazing. White love is amazing. As long as it hinges on the fact that you love the person and you are not worried about what that skin tone is.
It's so weird. Like in my experience with like being in an interracial relationship, I always thought black men in interracial relationships, this word is tutoring me, had it easier for some reason, because I thought like the community is so supportive because there's also like a lot of big role models. So you see like your Sia Khaleesi's with Rachel. So like society just for black men, it's like it's more imminent. And I didn't think of the fact that there's still that voice of like you're a sellout.
Well, think about Musi Maimane. So
fair enough. That's a good example.
Yeah. So it's those little nuances.
Yeah.
And listen, men have enough privilege. So as a black man, my privilege will overweigh whatever views the interracial part of my relationship will have.
Yeah.
And there are perks, like real perks in corporate, which shouldn't exist.
Yeah.
Where it's like, I'm going to be invited to the golf club because my wife is white.
Yeah.
And there's a commonality there.
Yeah.
So it just really depends on how you use it and what it means for you.
Yeah.
After time, I am a little too oblivious to what the outside world is saying and looking at.
Yeah.
And that's only because I think in my life it served me more than it's hindered me. And other people don't have that privilege.
Yeah. No, I can definitely attest. Like, if you going holidaying down Garden Route, you happen to be like in Neisner, you just shock people, and it makes you so uncomfortable. Like it's like the stairs and I need to ask this, but do you find you can bring your full self with your lived experience to your marriage? Because sometimes I guess the feeling is if you're in an interracial relationship, is that because you have certain lived experiences as a black person, that your partner can't necessarily relate to certain experiences. And maybe you might have experienced that like when you first brought Monique to meet your mom and there was that difference. Do you feel like you can bring your full self?
Yeah, I also, it's one of the things that I really struggle to understand, where people are hell-bent on being, you must be your authentic self everywhere. It's like, no, there's spaces and times and context to what that authentic self should be.
Exactly.
And people will at times even overshare on the basis of, no, but this is just me.
Yeah.
But in terms of our marriage, I do bring all of who I am, and I don't expect her to understand all of who I am.
Okay.
In the same way, I will never live as a woman, so there are things that I just won't get.
Sure.
And she'll never live as a black person, so there's things she just won't get.
Yeah.
You can empathize, but until you're in that person's literally skin, it's only then do you have that I'd say baggage. It's actually baggage, because it's years of different ways of racism that you face, of different comments, of different looks.
Yeah.
And all of those hone into the biases that you have when you're an adult.
Yeah.
But my marriage, at least, or our marriage,
Yes.
allows for me to be ridiculous when I need to be. And I can say it's because I'm disabled.
Yes.
And that won't be a factor that says you're not allowed to use.
Exactly. Your disability against me. Yeah.
Whereas, I use it all the time.
Yeah. I love that. Like, it's an authentic space. And I think that's the other thing. Like, maybe I think the mix that you guys have, and maybe it's also like the years that you've put in to sort of mold that for your marriage, to allow the space to authentically be. I feel like I need to bring Monique on this podcast. But yeah, and also like speaking into corporate, you're at Investec right now. And I think that in your field, if I can put it that way, you found a place that can allow you to bring Mpumi, the full self, the athlete, the academic. And how important is it to find a space or a company or a culture that allows for you to be truly out of the ordinary, as we would say at Investec?
The zebra.
Yeah.
I think for people in their 20s, it's the reason why it's so difficult, at least from what I've seen, is that you need a job.
Yeah.
I've got bills to pay, and especially from our experience of, there's black tax.
Exactly.
So you need a job. So first and foremost, when you're looking for a space, you're looking for just security. And that becomes your prime motivator of why you want to get in.
Yeah.
So you then accept certain norms and behaviors when you enter that space that you then want to change once you're comfortable in that space. And that's a very difficult thing, no matter how amazing an organization is.
Yeah.
Leadership plays a massive factor.
100%.
What has pre-existed you plays a massive factor. How you sit in the organization plays a massive factor.
Yeah.
So how I thought of it is that I'm only entering a space, and what is important to me is Pumi, the 3-tiered Pumi.
Yes.
If you don't want me, it's fine. I'll sit without a job. I've been poor before.
Yes.
My parents were poor. My grandparents were poor.
Yeah.
When is it going to kill me to be poor?
Sure.
I've got enough support that allowed me to wait until I could actually make my demands of, if this space is not this, then it's not for me. But once again, not everyone has that privilege.
I was going to say, because somebody might be listening and be like, but you're saying this from a privileged point of view. But I think it is so important to get to the point, especially as people of color, where you negotiate the terms and the environment, because we spend so much time at work that it does not make sense for you to spend time in an environment where you're unhappy or you're not being paid well for the work that you're putting in.
Yes.
Yeah.
And those terms must be, there must be a balance. There's sometimes where I don't get to be Pumi, the athlete or the academic, because the markets are volatile and I'm needed at work.
Yeah.
And because the flexibility runs both ways, they will keep me accountable of when I need to be part of the team, and the team's needs is more than the individual's needs.
Yeah.
But therefore, I have the expectation that majority of the time it will be about me, the person.
Yes.
And as long as that happens, then that's fine.
Yeah. And if we come back to Bumi, the sports, do I call you this athlete? I think it's athlete, or do I call you a pro athlete?
Whatever comes out of your mouth.
I'm trying to figure out what the correct professional term is. Take me through your key milestones. What were, your career to date, what have been your biggest milestones, and what played a factor to reach that specific milestone? Did you change diet? Did you change your training regime? What changed to bring about that specific milestone?
I've been slapped on the wrist many times when I answer this milestone conversation. So
Okay.
I'll answer it the way I've been told to answer it by my team.
Okay.
It's not just Pumi the athlete. There's a whole host of people that put in time, effort, and love into me being able to represent the country.
Yes.
Which is biggest milestone was the world record that we first broke in 2019. First ever time breaking a world record in the 200 meters out in Stellenbosch.
Yeah.
And that year we proceeded to break the 100-meter world record, the long jump world record, and we broke the world record, I think, 7 times that year,
Hectic, yeah.
which led to a silver medal and in the 100 meters and a bronze medal at the 2019 Dubai World Championships.
Yes.
That was the first key milestone in our journey. And I wouldn't say anything other than time changed.
Yeah.
You know, I'd been an athlete for a while. It's been 4 years. We had gone through the full cycle of preparation. We've had the foundations. I was actually injured when I did that competition.
Oh, wow.
But there was a massive amount of, my coach had told me when we started in 2015 is that we're in a 4-year cycle. In your 4th year, you'll reap the benefits. So when I got to the 4th year, I just had this ultra self-confidence.
Wow.
That, I'm just, that's what he said.
Yeah.
He doesn't lie.
Yeah.
Is
this Jason?
It's Jason.
Yeah, that's
It's
amazing.
Like he planned this out for 4 years.
Yeah.
And we repeatedly saw that I was breaking through all those barriers in training.
Wow.
And it was about replicating it into competition.
Yeah.
And I think that's the beauty of our sport. Our sport is you can surprise yourself in a competition, but most of the time, all the world records that currently exist have been broken in training.
Sure.
You break it enough in training, it will translate into competition, and that's all we focused on. And then the last milestone is being the world champion in the 100 meter now in Paris, so the 2023 World Championships.
Yes. Congratulations.
Thank you. And I'd say like this was the year I got married. It's the year I got fat and I had to lose a lot of weight.
What fat?
I was 10 kilos overweight after my honeymoon. And what really changed there was that's the first time I realized how big a factor what you put into your system makes. Because all we focused on is said, listen, you now have to go on a diet.
Yeah.
And there will be restrictions to how much you eat.
And talk me around, like, when you're getting into, how do I say, competition mindset, what goes through your mind? Like, do you have like a meditative practice that puts you into game mode? And like when you're behind the track and they're going 3, 2, 1 and the gun's about to go off, what's playing in your mind at that point? Or is it silence?
I wouldn't say silence. I don't know. I don't come across as somebody who loves positive affirmation, as my friends always tell me, but that's what happens in my mind.
Yeah.
I just literally go through all the things we did right. That's always the tick. Like wherever your mind is focused, it's what it will do naturally.
Yeah.
And so it's all the things we've done right. I know I do a lot of wrong and technically I'm not where I need to be, but in that time where it's time to actually perform, it's about, okay, dude, you put some goals on the table for the last 4 years. What did we achieve? Oh, we achieved this. Oh, we achieved this. And as you're ticking through the list, you go, I've been doing the things.
Exactly.
And that builds some sort of self-confidence in you, or at least in me, that allows you, when you step onto those blocks and they say on your marks, you go, well, what happens now, because at the end of the day, you can prepare all you like for a lifetime, but it's not your day.
Yeah.
And if it is your day, then, well, good for you. And it just so happens it's been my day more often than not, which we are grateful for.
Yeah. Do you still get nervous when you're about to go on the blocks, or is that like calm state? I'm always curious when I watch.
I don't know. It's a different type of nerve. It's an excitement to live out what you've been honing. I don't think it's the same jittery nerves that I did have when I was younger, where it's like, oh, the spotlight, the crowds.
Yes.
It's like, I really want to do that thing that coach says I keep getting wrong. I'm going to prove him wrong this time around. So it's more an excited feeling of, I can't wait for the gun to go so I can replicate what I've been practicing.
Yeah. And you, I guess from the experience of competing professionally, you're like well-traveled. What are some of the key highlights from your travels that you would say, or like moments that you'll never forget?
I've got too many moments I'll never forget.
Yes, okay. Limited to, let's say, the last 3 years. In the last 3 years, have there been any moments that you are special, that that had an impact on you, or you had like a moment of like, or at something?
Yeah, I'm an emotional wreck. So there's times where a cat comes up on me and I go, oh my gosh, this is the best moment in my life. But I think we were in Paris and a bird pooped on my shoulder, and I told Monique, hey, my gran is coming to tell me there are good things. And it's like,
Are you that guy?
I'm that guy.
Yeah.
So now I've had many special moments, but I'd say the key moment that has underpinned anything in any of my travels is who I travel with.
Yeah.
So having had the opportunity to travel is massive, but having had the opportunity to travel with my wife, having had the opportunity to travel with friends, with Coach Jay, who's literally like a bigger brother, father, mentor, and coach all in one. It allows you to see the world in other people's eyes and other people you admire. And that for me, you could never replace with anything.
Yeah.
Because there's beauty everywhere, but there's also a lot of, the grass is not greener aspects of traveling.
Yeah.
But it's that opportunity to see a different culture, different type of way of life through the eyes of the people that you love.
Yeah.
That has been, probably a shining light of my travels.
Yeah. And because we're mentioning like the grass is not always green on the other side, you mentioned earlier that like there's a huge disparity between being an athlete from the South versus, or let me say from a developing country versus the developed countries. What are some of the things that you think we should be working on as a country to support athletes better, especially our Olympians? Yeah.
My take is controversial, right?
Okay, let's hear. I love controversy.
And my take is that we put too much emphasis on sports as a country. We're a country that is suffering. We can't get our energy crisis right. Our transportation is in the gutter. We can't even get people employed. Our GDP hasn't been growing at a rate where we need it for decades now.
Sure.
Our corruption levels are out the roof. So I really think that what we need is a new wave of leadership that says, listen, there's three focuses that we need, which is the money that comes in must be accounted for.
Yeah.
And that's across the board. And then we need to get young people employed or skilled enough so that they are able to do something in this economy.
Yeah.
And then the third is that we need to ensure that there's transition plans, and that's from leadership, that's from our energy crisis, that is from our infrastructure that we've let deliberate on various fronts.
Yeah.
We shouldn't be spending hundreds of millions of dollars in just sport.
Yeah.
And sport does have a role to play, but I think only after we get the basics right can I then tell you that, okay, in sports, this is what we should be doing.
Yeah. I mean, somebody else might play, or I'll play devil's advocate and say like, but sport is so important. It's the nation building. It's, when Nelson Mandela held the cup, when we won the rugby in 95, it was like a unifying moment. And like, if we take a pause on the sports to fix the country, then where's the nation building part? How's it going to happen?
And I'd say to that, who did it unify in 95?
That's a good question.
I don't see it.
Yeah.
There's many aspects of our country that I've never been unified since then. And if anything, we are worse off. The Springboks have won the World Cup now 3 times.
Yeah.
Has that increased unemployment?
No, it hasn't.
Has it decreased unemployment?
It hasn't touched
GDP?
anything.
Has our corruption gone down? Is there more accountability in our leadership? So there is an aspect of we use sport as a way to forget our current troubles.
Exactly.
And I've got an issue with that.
Yeah.
It's like we can't just say, oh, now we all love each other because it's the Rugby World Cup.
Yeah.
No, we have massive issues in this country that we need to resolve. And we can only resolve if we want to accept that they exist. And then together we try make sure we hold our leadership accountable as we do with our sports leadership, because our sports leadership, we hold them accountable.
They're under fire. Like transformation happens so quickly in sports. It doesn't even,
And that needs to translate into state. And I think if that happens, then, people who are qualified or get an opportunity to qualify so that they can lead this country, then we can speak about unifying this country. But when you have jobs and people are employed and people don't have to live under the poverty line, people are happier.
Exactly.
And when people are happier, they'll come to stadiums. And when people come to stadiums, you'll get all the funding you need in sports.
Exactly. No, I'm happy you brought that up, because I think even I, as like a somebody in their 20s feel paralyzed with the state at which our country is in. Like, you don't actually know what to do, because and this is not to discourage people from voting. We need a systematic change. You need new blood in, you need younger people. If the average age of a person in South Africa is like, I think 18.5 or something. So young people, there's no representation of that in parliament. And it's showing that like young people need to take charge and they need to come into leadership, and there needs to be a better succession plan than what there is currently.
No, and 100%. And I'd say that voting is a start.
Yeah.
Because something's got to change, and the only means we really have at the moment that is effective is the ballot box.
That's true.
So we need more young people voting, and voting as they see it. I don't even think like if it's voting for majority party to be more majority, I don't care. But if we had 90% turnout and they said, this is what I want, then we can start asking ourselves, why does 90% of the population want this?
Yeah.
Is it because of, deep fears of the past that have never really been explained or dealt with? But at the moment, you can't have a take on what the country wants when half the country doesn't actually come to the ballot box to say what they want.
It's literally like, it's like swiping on Tinder with too many options that you get paralysis, that you don't know what party to vote for, so you end up not coming to vote. I think definitely there's room for us to increase like apathy amongst the youth, to really emphasize the fact that our voices can be heard. The fact that South Africa, majority of the country is the youth. It means that the change we want to see in parliament can only come from us.
Yeah, and that's how we ended apartheid. This is what
June 16,
This is what I don't understand.
Yeah.
It was the youth, it was the youngins.
Yeah.
They've stayed and they've become oldens. But
that's true.
But that's an African.
But there's a
curse.
new rising of the youngins.
Yeah, it's the African old tale of your liberator becoming your oppressor.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And talk me through black tax. Like, a lot of people of color, we fall under I don't want to call it a suppression, but it is that you can't really succeed. You can't detach from your family and say, okay, now I've made it, I'm just going to focus on my life. There's two approaches. Some people say like, get your career, help your family, but then there comes a cutoff point where you say, okay, now I need to focus on me, because I can't keep worrying about like my cousins and my uncles that need help. And there's other people that say like, that's just going to follow you to the grave. So how have you navigated black tax?
I've been on all ends of the spectrum, but what I will say, what I've learned with it is that just don't become people's crutches.
Yes.
I think that's the key factor. I do think that we do have an obligation, or I definitely feel an obligation to give to the community that raised me.
Yes.
The community that made sure that I got opportunities they didn't. And a lot of people have suffered so that I can sit in my comfortable seat with my degree.
Yes.
We always have, amongst friends, we always have this conversation when people want to say, I want to leave to go to Europe.
Yeah.
It's like, how do you think Europe is that safe? It's because of the slavery.
Exactly.
It's because of all those generations of what they did to others that they live on this pedestal where it's nice and safe.
Yeah.
So there's a consequence to all decisions that are made. And in black tax, just make sure that you're empowering the people that you're supporting.
Yeah.
So that if you cease to exist tomorrow, they are able to support themselves.
Yeah.
And if you're doing that, it'll feel different.
Yeah.
It won't feel as though you're an ATM.
It's not a burden.
Cow.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It will feel as though you're giving, a set of skill sets that you were once privileged to learn through what they sacrificed, so that they too can go further into life. And that's the only way we're going to get our communities anywhere.
Exactly.
Is that if we all band together and ensure that nobody is left behind.
Yeah. I think that's so crucial, because I think sometimes what ends up happening as black professionals, we feel like a cash cow, but sometimes the key is to invest in the little ones that are coming up. It's not a binary answer. It's not like a yes or no. It differs.
Yeah. That's my only advice. If you're ensuring that you're not a crutch and you're actually empowering the people that you're supporting, love it for you.
Yeah. And tell me, how do you find comfort in being, or as part of your identity, you're proud I'm assuming Xhosa man or Zulu. Why did I think for some reason I always thought you were Xhosa, but anyway, it's the Xhosa in me.
That's love. I think that was love. Thank you.
Yeah. So, like embracing your identity as a Zulu black man in corporate that's predominantly white. How do you get that space right? Have you found that you were intimidated and had to assimilate? I also think that's a difficult answer because there are times where assimilation is needed to open spaces. So
that's why we speak like this.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm not a Yabu person, but yeah. Yeah.
I think the big Zulus are stubborn, Xhosas are stubborn. We are stubborn and proud people.
Yes.
And if I look a bit of our heritage, I am stubborn. I will be wrong and sometimes not admit to being wrong.
Yeah.
But a lot of what we are taught from, I'd say the Ngunis, a lot of what we are taught is that community means everything.
Exactly.
And I think that translates extremely well in corporates, South Africa at least, because they're always speaking about, the franchise.
Yeah.
And I just say, you saying franchise, I think of it as community,
yes.
different words for the same thing. And we're all adding value so that we see this thing grow.
Yeah.
And as it grows, it will give more to the individuals that exist within it. And that has been largely successful.
Yeah. The reason why I ask you, I know I always get questions from people where they're like, how do you occupy space being yourself and not pretend to be someone else? Because sometimes you get to a certain environment, let's say as a woman, everyone's speaking about rugby. Now I'm like, okay, I'm going to have to pretend like I knew what happened in the rugby cup this weekend. Now I'm like having to learn all the terms instead of showing up and be like, actually, this weekend we watched Kaizer Chiefs versus Pirates. This is what my family does, because I think in corporate our default is to speak about sports. Like we assume that it's like a commonality. Club. Yeah, exactly.
It's a boys' club.
Yeah.
Once again, I come from a privileged position where I'm a man and I'm a black man.
Yeah.
So I don't watch most of the games. And half the time they're like, oh, did you watch? No. They're like, huh? It was your team playing. I was like, Manje, what must I do about that? I had other things to do.
Exactly.
And I feel comfortable enough to do that because I am a man.
Yeah.
And I'm already accepted in that culture just on the basis of my gender. So I can't really speak to feeling as an outsider within a space where I'm Zulu.
Fair point.
What we know is what we know. There's times where I speak Zulu to my boss.
Yes.
And he'll ask, like, what are you saying? And I'll say, you must learn Zulu, Baba. That's the most spoken language in South Africa.
Exactly.
Because, dude, but English is the corporate language. I'm like, I don't care.
Yeah.
If you want to know what I'm saying, you must go learn. And slowly people actually realize this. I'm not doing that to look down on you, but it's something that will help you in your everyday life so that you also understand the people that you surround yourself with.
Exactly.
Because that's the majority of our country.
100%.
And it starts with the language. If you understand the language, you'll be able to actually hear where people are coming from. And that's a big part of what corporate South Africa needs to learn.
I absolutely agree with you, because human connection, I find that there's a barrier. And even as somebody who would be like termed as knowing how to speak English, sometimes I can't express, like the words are flying in Xhosa or Zulu in my head, and then I'm like, what's the English word? Then you can't express it. But the minute you meet somebody at their home language, there's an instant connection, even if it's broken, but the effort that you're trying to put in shows.
And you must say it. And you'll see soon. There's a weird thing about people wanting to be liked that we don't realize works both ways. So corporate South Africa, with it being a boys' club, boys are uncomfortable when it comes to accepting women into their spaces. It's the Ken effect if you've watched Barbie.
Yes.
But it's then, I went to watch Oppenheimer. No, I went to watch Barbie.
Exactly.
Barbie was
you need to be proud. Exactly.
And as soon as more people are doing it, you do find a lot of allies. And then that space can coexist with the boys' club being the boys' club and you being yourself, not having to know what the rugby score was or the football Premier League score was.
Absolutely. And now, if I can ask, Mpumi or Mpumelelo Mhlongo, 10 years from now, what does that look like?
Who knows?
10 or 20 years, or do you have like a legacy goal that you have in mind, or what when the time comes, or at the end of life, when you say I've run my race, I've finished my course, what does that look like?
To be honest, I've achieved everything I've ever thought of and more. So Monique always hates it when I say it. I'm like, I could die tomorrow and I'll be extremely happy.
Yeah.
On the pure basis that there were certain things I wanted to do by the time I would die. I've done all of them, and I've added more, and I've done all of that to the point at which I was like, that the next 10 years is more about how much more can Mpumelelo give to his immediate communities.
Yeah.
And I'm slowly building what that might look like in various spheres. And when that is honed, I'll be able to say, but it might manifest into something very different.
Sure.
In 2 years, but we just keep growing.
Mpumi, I can't believe, like, I think very few people can say that at like such a young age. Like most of us, I think you have, is it because you've absolutely done everything under the sun, or is it that you found contentment in the things you've done to date?
It's what's important to you. And, what's really been important to me is, can I love the same way I was loved?
Yeah.
I can love the same way I was loved. Can I receive love in the way in which I love? I can receive love.
Sure.
Have I, in what I do on a daily basis, made other people who are strangers smile or feel inspired or feel as though they can tackle the next day just on the basis of looking at my life and the little that I've done? And I've done that. So,
Sure.
I mean, what more could you ask for in life other than that? Others do, and that's their prerogative, but I think that's been enough for me.
The metric that I think your metric of measurement is what I was not expecting. And so when you answer it like that, because other people, they'll be like, I would have traveled 110 countries, I would have done this. But then you bring it fundamentally to the principles that matter in life, but also specifically to you. That other people might feel that traveling is a goal for them, and that's okay. But I think fundamentally it does boil down to love for self, love for others, love for community, and leaving the world a better place, whether it's through inspiring other humans, touching other people's lives, or using your life as a catalyst for inspiration.
I couldn't have said it better. And that's why I don't have a 10, 20-year plan. I had that when I was 15 and it was finished. So now every day is just about building on the previous day. And if I can remain happy as I do it, I'd be extremely ecstatic.
Thank you so much for this conversation. I think time just went by really quick. So Mpumi, if there's 2 pieces of advice that you can give to people in our community that are navigating the 20s, what would you say?
I'd say the first thing about navigating your 20s is make it exciting. You need to dream bigger than you've ever dreamt before, because you're going through massive amounts of transition from being a teenager to being an adult, and then forming what your narrative looks like going forward with the retrospective of what you thought your parents did and your community did for you. So just make it exciting. And the second thing I'd say is your 20s can either be the start or the end of your life. And what I mean by that is the habits that you build in your 20s will carry you through. I don't know this myself, but it's what I've been told by very wise people. So build the habits that you want to show that this is the start of life. This is the worst time of your life, and it can only get better from there.
And that's it for our 9th episode. Thank you for being a part of this growing community. And if this conversation has touched you or helped you in any way, consider sharing it with a friend, colleague, or even a family member. You can also support the show by subscribing to the podcast and giving us a rating on your podcast platform or on our YouTube channel. If you are looking for a place to debrief about episode 9 with Mpumelelo, follow our social media pages Navigating the 20s on LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and Facebook. Remember that our last LinkedIn and Substack newsletter for 2023 will be out today, which is the 20th of December. This has been Navigating the 20s. We will be back with more on the 27th of December.